All right, hello guys. I'm Jason with the Method of Language course, and the other day we recorded a video of basically a short interview, actually an interview with our friend Shane from London. Lasted for a while. We planned for it to be 10 minutes. It ended up becoming a half-an-hour interview. It was pretty fun. It was really good. We talked about basically London, where he came from, life there, and how it compared to life here in Jogja. And I think it's something that you all might find interesting. So without further ado, let's play the video. Jason from Ambassador Language Center, and today I'm with Shane. He's a friend from London, and today I'll be interviewing him, asking him questions regarding, where he's from and how he feels now that he's here. Okay, let's start, asking him questions about his place of origin, London. So Shane, tell us a little bit about London. What's it like generally?
So London is such a large city, it's hard to generalise. Each area of the city has a slightly different atmosphere. Where I'm from is more the outskirts, but I think the area of London people typically think about is the centre of London, where there's a lot of historical buildings, there's, skyscrapers, monuments, a lot of public spaces. There's a lot of arts and creativity, theatre, Broadway, that kind of thing. So it's quite hard to describe London, but I would say it's a multicultural mass of creativity and free thinking. I think London's a very interesting place to be.
All right, cool. Is it an expensive city? Because I think that's what Indonesians will care about.
Yes, London is very expensive. The thing is, I wouldn't be able to live in what people consider London, like central London. I wouldn't be able to live there, it's too expensive for me. But I still think that it's possible for people to live on the outskirts and travel into London and still have that experience of London, of the London that they kind of see in movies and stuff like that.
Yeah. Is it easy to get around there? What's public transport like?
London has a really developed system of public transport. Everybody uses the public transport. Actually, most people favour public transport over cars, especially in central London. You can get a bus, you can get a tube, which is an underground train, you can get an overground train. We famously have the London Underground, which is, I think, one of the oldest underground networks. And yeah, I mean, it can be busy at times, it can be slightly expensive, but it's very convenient, it's very fast, and it's very effective. So public transport is a massive part of British culture.
Okay, and we know there are 4 seasons there, and the question is, what's your favorite season?
Summer is everybody's favourite season. Everybody just waits for summer. They endure every other season just to get to summer. But we do have some endearing seasons, like autumn, when all the leaves turn brown, they start to fall down, golden brown, some different shades of yellow. It's quite enchanting. But most of the time, it's rainy, it's cold, it's miserable. Not all the time, but as a English person, you learn to adapt. Though sometimes it's so unpredictable. You put your coat on, and you go outside, and it's sunny, and you take your coat off, it starts raining. So you never know until summer. Then it's a bit more consistent.
Yep. So you mentioned that it's a metropolitan place, right?
Yeah.
And my question is, are there many people from other countries living there? And are there many Indonesians living there?
Absolutely. I think part of the British identity is multiculturalism. So we have a lot of Indian migrants, a lot of African migrants. I mean, most of these are actually born, a lot of people of other ethnicities born in England. So there's no, you don't look at me and if you were in England, you would think I'm British, but there are so many other ethnicities that make up Britain, and there's a lot of Asian migrants too, and there's also a lot of tourists. So amongst the soup of ethnicities, it's hard to identify who's actually British and who's a tourist. there aren't actually. I have never met an Indonesian person living in the UK. There's a lot of Thai people. There's a lot of Filipino people. Come to study, come to work, come to live, and integrate. So yeah, I think that's one of the things I cherish about the UK. It's multiculturalism, and the hospitality and the tolerance towards different cultures. So yeah.
All right. And if some of our Indonesian friends decided to visit, what would be some of the places that we absolutely cannot miss?
If you were to visit London?
Yes, if we were to visit London.
So if you were to visit London, I'd say you absolutely can't miss the Tate Modern Museum. It's a gigantic art museum with so many interesting installations. You can't miss Hyde Park or some of the amazing parks in London, like massive open spaces. And I mean, for most people, I think most Indonesians would be fascinated by Big Ben, Buckingham Palace, some of those famous monuments and historical buildings. But even just walking around central London, every building feels like a monument. Actually, the British Museum is amazing. It's from the outside, obviously, kind of this pristine, carved historical building, and then you go inside, and it's almost like a building inside a building, just kind of marble everywhere, fantastic. It's like another world, yeah. So there are a lot of, I think, architecture, public spaces, the kind of things that Jogja lacks in ways. So yeah.
So you mentioned parks. I would think that in your free time you would just go to these parks and relax, or are there any other things that you do for fun there, in your free time?
Yeah, I think the parks are a big part of everyone's childhood, but also growing up, you go to the park to play football, you go to the park just to relax and converse with your friends. Everything, the parks are a great place, for any activity, not just football or sports, not just conversation, but, they're for families, they're for any age group. I think without the parks, Britain wouldn't be Britain, London wouldn't be London. Our public spaces are a massive asset.
Okay, so let's say you're a British citizen, and you live in London. Obviously, you live in the outskirts of London.
Yeah.
Where would you go on holiday? Obviously, you don't go to London on holiday. Where would you go?
You mean where would I go?
In London, in Britain.
In Britain. If I were to go on holiday in Britain, I think it depends on what appeals to you. For me, I love a natural escape, so I'd go to the Scottish Highlands or to the Lake District. This is a beautiful, pristine area of natural, it's a preserved area of natural beauty with hills and lakes, and it's fairly untouched. You can walk 10 miles and you wouldn't see a plastic bag, which is very refreshing. That is very refreshing. The Scottish Highlands are another world. You have mountainous terrain. These are the kind of places that are so remote. If you get lost there, you might not be able to get help. But if you're careful, you can have an amazing time and see some very surreal landscapes that you wouldn't expect from the UK. Because most people in the UK just see our landscapes, see our natural scenery as very tame and very boring. And so they're always looking to other places. We have this kind of exotic imagination. Other faraway lands are far more beautiful, but there's actually a lot of beauty in our homeland. So, yeah.
Okay, and so finally, regarding your place of origin, what's the one thing about Britain that you miss the most?
The one thing about Britain that I miss the most, that's a difficult one. It would probably be the parks. Just being able to walk down the road and go to a massive green space, so refreshing, just to escape. Even though it's not the pollution in the UK is very, very low, everything's still quite efficient. yeah, it's really nice. Those open green spaces are so refreshing.
Yeah, I think this might be surprising, but for people, thinking of coming to Indonesia, I guess coming from Britain, you would imagine Indonesian to be this lush green paradise, but then you see crowds of people when you're here. It's hot and sweaty, and there isn't a lot of like big open spaces, green spaces.
I think the universities. I think in Indonesia, the universities are that forum for people to relax and do sports activities and stuff like that. So in UGM, for instance, you see like crowds of joggers, crowds of runners, because I think they don't have other spaces to use. So I quite like how the university campuses become these like communal places for people to relax, refresh themselves, engage in different hobbies and activities. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not something that's like common. Yeah, I mean, like the universities where you get your big open spaces, but it's just not. We just don't have a lot of those. Yeah. So now I'd like to ask you regarding how you feel now that you're in Indonesia. How long have you been here, and is this your first time? And what brought you here the first time, actually?
Okay. The first time I came.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been in Indonesia for 6 months, and this is actually my third time here, my third visit. And the first time I came here was after I graduated from university, and I decided to go on a little adventure with my twin brother and my friend. And we were discussing various places, Southeast Asia and also China. We didn't want to fall into the same tourist trap and kind of go to Thailand or go on a kind of Southeast Asian trail. We wanted to focus on one place, wanted to experience that culture from a local standpoint. And I think we were looking at the map. We were kind of going around everywhere. Where should we go? And we were neglecting this kind of pocket. The people generally don't look down and go, oh, Indonesia, because it's like, okay, there's Thailand, there's all the other countries, Laos, Vietnam, and there's such a distraction from Indonesia. But yeah, I suggested Indonesia, and I actually posted on Expats Indonesia group about, I just wanted some information, some advice, and like the response was so enthusiastic, I was immediately won over by the Indonesian mentality, and I was really encouraged to come here and explore.
Okay, so how do you feel about the country? So, what do you like most about the country so far?
Okay. What do I like most about the country? I would say that it has to be the people. Yeah, I think if it wasn't for the Indonesian mentality of kind of generosity and warmth, then I wouldn't be here. Yeah, and wherever you are, without the people, without that warmth and charisma, and without those accommodating people, it's just a landmass. It's just a piece of land. So for me, Indonesia is all about the people, and all of my friends are Indonesian, and I previously had an Indonesian girlfriend, so obviously there is something lovable about Indonesian people. That's what's going to keep me here, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so one thing that people are surprised about is how much Indonesian our foreign friends actually speak. So actually, how much Indonesian do you speak, and like how difficult was it to learn?
Should I answer in English?
You can try answering in English. That's fine.
Saya bisa bahasa Indonesia sedikit, tapi to begin with, mulai.
To begin with, actually,
you've been speaking too much English. Okay, so it was quite hard to learn initially. For any English person, grasping a new language is a kind of alien concept. I don't know. I think our culture is constructed to make us believe that it's really difficult to become bilingual. So we have I would say we have a slight disadvantage. We don't take languages seriously in school. We haven't got this mentality where languages become important. So it was at first it was quite daunting, But when I started to embrace it and I started to put myself into situations where I had to speak Indonesian more, regardless of whether or not it's embarrassing, because sometimes it is very embarrassing when you know you're making mistakes and people seem confused and you're confused and you're just looking at each other like, what's going on? But eventually, became more, lebih lancar.
Hey, nice. And the Indonesian word for that, by the way, is pada awalnya. But then, well, that's a bit more formal. But awalnya is at the beginning.
Oh.
Yeah, but anyway.
I wanted to begin with.
Yeah.
I was so gone.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I.
Oh, that makes sense. Pada awal.
Yeah, at the beginning. Yeah, right now I have to assert my Indonesianness.
Nobody believes you.
No.
You've lost your...
So yes, and is there anything you think here that you find similar to your to Britain in Indonesia, and anything here that you find the most different?
Similarities are few. If I had to know any similarities, I think it would be the universities. I mean, I've been to the Philippines, and the university culture seems slightly different, but the university campuses here resemble some of the campus universities in the UK, and I quite like that culture. I quite like that university culture. When I go to UGM, there's so many things going on, people dancing, people running. That's something I admire, that's something I appreciate, and something I could say is quite slightly similar to the UK. The similarities don't go far beyond there. I mean, we've got roads, you've got trees, but otherwise I would say cultural similarities are few. And as well, I think Indonesia doesn't have a lot, like some countries have a lot of multicultural things, have a lot of, for instance, Malaysia was once a British colony, right? They've got like shops and things that are actually English. They've taken to British culture, I think, more probably forcibly because we colonized them. But Indonesia's, I think, a bit more separate. And being an island, of course, it doesn't really need to engage with other cultures.
Well, I think like Indonesia is such a huge place, and it'll be quite surprising for when many people learn that it's a country, but it's made up of so many different races and cultures. In Java alone, you have different, like, these people speaking different languages. In let's say in Central Java and then in West Java, and they can't understand each other, and they have completely different customs and culture. So it's quite surprising for a lot of our visitor friends. Yes, and what do you think is what did you find the most surprising when you first got here? Like, oh my God, this is Indonesia! I'm so surprised.
I don't know. I think I was fairly prepared.
Okay. Done
But
your homework.
Yeah, I do. I always do my homework. I do a lot of research because although I like to be spontaneous and I like to embrace, different possibilities and challenges, I was really interested in Indonesia. So naturally, my sense of curiosity got the better of me. I think one of the biggest surprises was, I don't want to say anything negative, but probably the way that Indonesians as a whole disregard the environment. And so the plastic and the pollution and the lack of, Indomart, I think it's quite surprising how it's got like no fresh produce. So there's like no healthy food. I think the lack of healthy food sometimes is what surprises me, considering that in a tropical country like Indonesia, there's such an abundance of fruits and vegetables, but people tend to eat a lot of Indomie or Indomie, the pride of Indonesia. But yeah, I expected, there to be more fresh produce available, to be other healthy options, but everything seems to be fried. That's the one thing.
That's right, yes.
I think they'd fry me if they could.
Yeah, I think regarding the food, this is something also that a lot of foreigners are surprised about. Like we Indonesians, yeah, you're right. Especially in Java, actually, they fry everything. If you go down to some of the islands in Sumatra, actually where I come from, like we deal with meat differently. Like there's a lot more like boiling, steaming, different ways of preparing the food. But yeah, people in Java tend to like, okay, here's a banana, fry it. Here's this, fry it. Okay, and what is the one thing actually, there's one more thing I wanted to say, like what you said about the environment. It is so true. It's not something that we culturally are aware of. And I think the concept for us is more like, if no one's looking, this piece of garbage is on the floor, it's not my responsibility. And there, and this is interesting because a lot of people look at us as being more in touch with nature. At least that's their first perception of us is, and then they come and they realize, oh my God, these guys are just littering. So what is your experience with Indonesian food actually? How has that been like? And have you had nasi padang? This is a very important question. And and what's the weirdest thing you've had so far?
Okay. So actually, my experience with Indonesian food would be quite a unique experience because I'm vegan, which means I don't eat any animal products. I don't eat eggs or milk or meat. So I don't eat anything that is derived from an animal. And this is for moral reasoning. You know, I respect the lives of animals, and I don't want to exploit them. I don't want to contribute to any exploitation. So I eat a lot of gado-gado, I eat a lot of lotek, I eat a lot of vegetable dishes, and I also like to cook for myself. So sometimes the options can be limited in Indonesia. I think, you know, you have an overwhelming amount of chicken and other meats or indomie or noodles and things like that. But I can get along quite well. I think I have to just becoming more familiar with the options. I like, what do I like? What was that thing I was just eating?
Just eating something, it was, we don't know what it's called.
We don't know.
I know, it's a shame being in Indonesia.
Some kind of cake.
Some kind of cake.
But yeah, I mean, I've become more familiar with the options, and actually you'd be surprised at how many things are vegan in Indonesia, and I think if I could illustrate that, then people would be surprised. Sorry, what was the question again?
Have you had nasi padang?
I haven't had nasi padang. It's not something I think I can eat. It's kind of meat-based, right? But if there was a vegan nasi padang, I would really go for that, yeah. So I think the weirdest thing I've tried, because I don't know, the weirdest thing I've tried, I don't know if I wouldn't remember the name.
The thing is, for many Indonesians, the combination of chocolate and cheese in bread is something that is quite normal. But I know, like our Western friends, they think that's a horrible combination. So and we think that's normal, for example, something like that.
I have tried a strawberry cheese bread. It was vegan actually, made by the lovely people at Fortunate Coffee. It's starting to sound like an advert, but yeah, it's a bit, I would say it's absurd. Strawberry cheese. It was manageable. Let's say that.
I think a wise person said that you have to learn to think outside the box, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't know what the hell the box is, it's very easy to just mix things up and mix strawberry and cheese, for example. Okay, and the next question I'd like to ask is, do you cook your own meals, and have you been cooking British dishes at home?
It's funny you say that because I have been cooking my own food, but generally people in the UK, I would say they eat British food like once a week. Because we embrace other cultural foods, or we steal other cultural foods. We love, I think there are certain food cultures that are famous throughout the world, in Italian, Indian, Chinese, Japanese. So people generally associate with those foods, and they've become built into English culture. You know, you go to the supermarket, you can buy a pizza. You go to the supermarket, you can buy noodles, rice, Asian dishes, Asian sauces, to make it really easy, just to make it like stir fry or something like that. So when I was at university, that's probably the period of my life where I cooked the most. I would eat Indian food, Japanese food, Italian food most of the time, a lot of homemade pizza, homemade pasta, and other dishes like that. So I like to cook a lot, and I think to be healthy, you should cook, because when somebody prepares food for you, you don't know exactly what they're putting into it. But I love to cook. I'm passionate about food, so that's something that I cherish when I can be bothered, when I have the energy.
And you can be sure that when someone else cooks for you in Indonesia, it has MSG.
Yeah.
So can be sure of that. This one is a very important question. How are you finding local television, the shows, the cinetrons? Like, do you follow any specific cinetron, for example?
Thankfully, I don't have a TV. Because Indonesian television is quite absurd. I would say it's like very over dramatic. It's like in some ways a bit childish, a bit. It could be extreme. It could be a bit, I don't know, provocative or whatever. It's. If I could recall the name of the show that I've watched, I wish I could. But generally, the style of presenting or the style of acting seems like slightly over the top. So it's fun. I guess it's good fun for maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Were you surprised that people have like internal monologues all the time?
No, like what?
Like, you know, like they would always be like, you know, they would just look fierce and then like, you know, oh, here's what I'm talking. Oh, you horrible person, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, because generally I think English drama is more subtle, and I think that's something that I appreciate, because you have to read into it, you have to apply some kind of understanding. But yeah, maybe it's a bit too obvious.
Yeah.
You know, when you have this like stare off between two people that is like, it's like 20 minutes long or something like that, with like 5 different shots of their faces changing, and it's crazy.
Yeah. And I think it would be like much more creative to have like 2 people stare off, but then like they're actually thinking of like, okay, have I turned off the gas? And wait a minute, have I done this or that? That'd be quite more, you know, a little bit more interesting and a bit more humorous. But no, we don't do that. So it's like, you know, everything's very transparent. And the last question I think is quite important. What advice would you give to people who are from your home country, who are coming to Indonesia, and like things that they'll have to be prepared for and things like that?
So for people moving from the UK, if you have no experience with Asian culture or Southeast Asian culture particularly, I think you might be underprepared. You need to understand that there's a certain beauty to the chaos in Indonesia. So in Europe, I think everything seems to be quite structured and organized and effective and efficient, and that's good because it's clean and it's not very polluted or anything like that. But internally, people are kind of managing the stress that results from trying to maintain that environment. And in Indonesia, I think people are generally stress-free, but it can be quite a stressful environment, and unless you're willing to embrace the chaos. So yeah, I think embracing the chaos is my advice, and that's probably my key piece of advice. But then, of course, turn a blind eye to some of the issues in Indonesia. Learn to cherish the things that are positive about Indonesia, you know, because it's very easy to become pessimistic, you know, when you see trash and pollution and things like that. It can wear you down, but you know, there's always something to uplift you, whether it's the mentality of Indonesians or other parts of the culture.
So he just basically say that our country is chaotic. So
in a charming way. It's a charming chaos.
Yeah, but I feel like that's the one thing that I think is quite endearing to a lot of friends from overseas that come here and they realize, well, Indonesia is a little chaotic, but you know, people are relatively relaxed about most things. Yeah, so I think, and the one thing is that like a lot of people think that Indonesia is a super conservative country and they're like super strict about everything, but in fact in most of society nowadays, in most places at least, in cities, you'll find that a lot of Indonesians are relatively they're quite open-minded. Yeah, they're friendly and so forth. All right, I think that's it. This has been a recording. Yeah, made in Ambassador Language Center. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed that, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one. All right, so that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did recording it. And yeah, if you could share this video with your friends, it'd be awesome. We'd be really grateful. So thank you. Like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.